Today is Tuesday, August 15th, 2017. I woke up this morning with a message that an interview that I had done a couple of weeks ago was being published in the Washington Post. And it talks about a project that I'm just launching called Made East River. And you can go online and see what Made East River is about. You can go online to Washington Post and actually search my name or Made East River, and you'll see what that article has to say. And if you're involved with anything in Ward 7 and 8 that involves creating product or services, there's a whole list of categories. Be certain to register so that we can begin to get something going on in this fashion using that particular tool. It's not the only tool that exists east of the river. It's just one that I've put together. This conversation is going to be entitled Negotiating Maturity, number 1. And I'm going to talk a bit about negotiating maturity. I just recently entered into my 76th year of existence in this realm. And I refuse to call myself 76 years old. I call myself 76 years of age. And, you know, you get to this place in life and you wonder, this time in your life, I should say, it's like the fall of the year, of your life year, so to speak. And you wonder, why am I still here? I get notices from 2 sources significantly. No, more than that, actually. 4 sources, but primarily 2 sources. One is a sister named Gwen Smith, who is a fellow alumnus of Eastern High School. And Leroy Lowry is a former student, as I was, at Howard University back in the 60s. Both of these things happened, these educational experiences happened in the late 50s, early 60s. And I can count on once a month, twice a month, now it's getting more frequent, that notices are coming about the passing of so-and-so back and forth. And then I get the New York Times every day, and I look to see if anybody of any significance from their point of view, especially, there's an article there about their life, you know, the fact that they've left us and their life. And of course, in the Washington Post, a friend of mine who lives in the building I live in here passes me her Washington Post newspapers, and most days she'll have the Metro section listed in it, included. And in there, I look to make sure I'm not in there. I have a friend, her name is Joan Thornell. We grew up together. She's like a big sister. And we both jokingly talk about looking in the Washington Post to make sure that we aren't listed. Well, but it takes you to, at least it takes me to a place where I kind of wonder, why am I still here? You know, I don't have a question about what my purpose is, because I've been real clear about that most of my life. You know, being as creative as I can be and significantly in the service of others. And so those of you who know my history know that most of that creative energy has been spent in the arts, as a photographer, videographer, as a teacher of media, photography, videography especially, to young people, as well as a teacher of community history to young people, manager of a cultural space in downtown DC for 25 years. It was called the Maya Gallery. And during that time, actually spent about 4 or 5 years creating an outdoor media environment, internet classroom at one point, to internet, what do they call it? Internet space where people had access to the internet. And we taught folks about the use of the internet at the annual Black Family Reunion that was conducted by the National Council of Negro Women. That was an interesting experience because you were down on the mall. In fact, one time I was literally on the same piece of ground that the new Museum of African American History and Culture currently resides. That's where we first started, in that block. And for 5 years I had a phone line connected in that area that I could turn on and off every year so that I could get internet services in when we were doing dial-up at that point. And we had, I'm trying to remember, at least 20 or 30 computers set up at one point, and most of the time, for people to be able to come and learn about the internet, this new technology. So we did that until actually the year of 9/11, 2001. And that weekend before 9/11, was our last time doing that project. And since 2008, for now 9 years plus, almost 9.5 years, I've been presenting jazz programs, jazz cultural programs, and initially in Baltimore, in about 10 or 11 distinct different neighborhoods, in community venues, museums. The noise you're hearing in the background is construction across the way from me, right in the middle of encroachment by millennials. But at any rate, in Baltimore, we did projects in art galleries, museums, schools, jazz venues, restaurants, churches, outdoor spaces. Started in 2008, and in 2011 came to DC and had a series at the formerly the Anacostia Art Gallery and Boutique that was owned by Juanita Britton. We did a series of 7 events there that year, and then the following year we began to be a partner with the annual DC Jazz Festival, and we've been doing that ever since. And more recently got a grant from the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, and have been doing programs. Primarily in these latter years, we've been doing programs celebrating specific artists, especially in the 100-year milestones of their lives. So in 2015, we did a series of 43 different events celebrating the composer Billy Strayhorn. That was a wonderful year, in fact. And then this year we're celebrating the 100th anniversaries of the births of Ella Fitzgerald, John Burks, Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious Spear Monk. We've got, how many, 2 or 3 different projects at this point that are going to take place. October the 7th, the Karen Lovejoy and her Lovejoy group will perform at Randolph-Macon College down near close to Richmond, Virginia. That's on the first Saturday in October, and I think we've got a project at the Anacostia Museum celebrating Hispanic History Month in the middle of October with the Rumba Club at the Anacostia Museum. And then the following month at the Anacostia Museum, Alon Nesheton, who's an Israeli pianist who's based out in New York, will bring his ensemble down to do a monk project at the Anacostia Museum. I'm working on trying to get some artists scheduled into the Millennium Stage Project over at the Kennedy Center. Ideally, I'd like to have Freddie Dunn do his Dizzy project. He's already done it once doing Jazz Fest at the Anacostia Playhouse, and I'd like to get saxophonist Carl Grubbs to do his monk project and at the Kennedy Center. So we'll see if I'm able to do those kind of things. But at any rate, like I said, this is about negotiating maturity. And why do I do what I do and continue to do what I do when a lot of friends I know that are around my age and older and younger, in fact, are, quote, retired. It's just not something in my mind to do, to retire to do nothing. And there's nothing wrong with those who want to do that, but that's just not me. So I've got a bucket list of things that I'll share today. One, I want to build a structure, ideally using recycled material. And I'm kind of fixated on shipping containers as part of that scenario. And primarily a structure in which to work in, but I could live in it too, but definitely a space to work in. I've got a ton of, I mean literally 2,000 books, a whole collection of photographic negatives that I produced mostly in the 60s and from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. A lot of documents, papers, etc. that need to be sorted through just to perhaps scan some of the material to save it. Also to discern what's important and what isn't important, to throw away things that are of a historic value after scanning them, perhaps donating them to the new African American Museum of History and Culture. They've been asking me about my negatives as well, and I'm considering that once I create digital copies of that material. I've got a lot of African American and African art objects, a significant collection of dolls, but mostly in wood, but dolls, they're small objects. I have some fabric dolls as well. For some reason or other, I kind of fell into that groove of collecting. And then there are other objects as well that I have. And so I really want to be able to get to a place where I'm working with some young people and teaching them about the history of these things as they help me sort through all of this stuff and put it into order. So, they'll be scanning negatives to make digital copies, and they'll see something and they'll ask, well, what's this or what's that? And of course, I can tell them, and it becomes an oral history exercise in telling them about Oh, this photograph I shot of Carter G. Woodson's house back in the early 70s. Um, and it was just the front steps and the, what do you call it, the railing. But, the photograph is just, it's almost like a throne in a way. Or images I shot in Harlem, 1968. There's one in particular called Jesus is Calling the Young, and a friend of mine, Neville Featherstone, and he came to visit, and we were riding around, and I was riding shotgun, he was driving, and I just saw all this signage on the side of this building. I think it was on 7th Avenue. We were going north in Harlem. And I said, stop. And I pulled out my camera and I shot just one picture. I said, okay, and I kept on going. When I developed the film, there was this sign, all these signs on it, but the sign above the door said, Jesus is calling the young. And who was walking through the door at the time that Jesus was calling the young? That we stopped, that I stopped and took that photograph. Young people. There's no, that, I didn't set that up or any rest of that. That was the creator saying, hey, stop and record this image, because it's going to be meaningful as you share it with people moving forward, about the creator calling the young. It was kind of a holy, also they called the place a Holy Ghost filling station. It was interesting signage on the side of this building. Didn't look like a church. It looked more like the door to a warehouse, actually. But, so there was that image. It was, image 68 was really a wonderful year, because I traveled all over the place. It was images of Miles that I shot down in the village. Dr. King, earlier in the year before he made transition, I think it was February at Vermont Avenue Baptist Church. It wasn't the last time he spoke in D.C., but it was next to the last time. My father and I, my sister just shared it. She was with us. I didn't realize that, but I remember my dad and I going together. And I just had full access. I was up above him, below him, all around. It's just real interesting, these shots I made of Dr. King. I couldn't tell you the first word he said. I mean, I don't remember anything about what he said. I was just into the moment of it all and just shooting these interesting pictures. Or in the early 70s, traveling to Uganda, actually the mid-70s, 76, the fall of 76, traveling to Uganda and spending a month there with Idi Amin. And that was an interesting trip. That was the last time I traveled to Africa. I'm overdue, obviously, 1976. Prior to that, in 1972 or 3, I think it was the transition from 72 to 73, I was in Liberia with the late Max Robinson shooting a film about the new Talbot administration, inauguration that took place in that period of time. That was my first time being in Africa. I've only been there twice, and that was an interesting time as well. But at any rate, all this kind of stuff that I've been doing, and so back to why am I still here? I think I have a lot to share and give, and I know a lot of people who have a lot to share and give, and I'm kind of like a vehicle for that kind of sharing to take place. It's been happening with musicians in terms of their performance. I'm beginning to collaborate with some for them to actually communicate their stories and share their skills in workshops or you know, lecture demonstrations, etc., so people can kind of see them in another light other than just up in front of them, just performing. But you know, these people have families. They raise children. They pay rent like everybody else, or house knows. You know, they have histories similar to most of us in terms of the difference is that they have genius in regards to the skills they've acquired in music. It's like a science when you listen to them talk about the different aspects of the music, man. It's like another language that they speak and practice with, you know. And I want people to get to know that better so that they can appreciate and protect, especially jazz. It's really important because there's so much real significant history in the people who came along, especially during the bebop era, which started mid-40s or so with Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Monk, and Miles, and Coltrane, and the Prez, and it goes on and on and on. All these people, Dinah Washington, you know, Billie Holiday, all these people, men, women, who actually lived some significant lives and shared in a very public way who they were through their instruments. And their instruments were voice, and their instruments were wind instruments, their instruments were percussion instruments, string instruments. You know, they communicated new language with us, and a lot of that material, of course, has been preserved and recorded in there in albums and vinyl especially. I'm fortunate to have a few hundred of those. I have friends who have a significantly larger amount of that music. Bill Brower comes to mind, who's just got a whole room full of it. You know? And to have conversations with people like a Bill Brower, for instance, who people, they see him around, he's got an interesting kind of persona, his locks and what have you. But those who know him well know that he's a genius. Others see him and say, oh, it's kind of an interesting looking guy. And they may see him at jazz events. They typically might think he's there just to enjoy the music, but he's there to write about it. He's there to record it, especially photographically. He's more often than not, you don't see him at performances other than when he steps out to bring a piece of equipment to change a set from one performance group to the next, because he manages performances, stage manages performances. You see him at the Mid-Atlantic Jazz Festival, for instance. He also runs, he and Cedric Hendricks run the Black Caucus jazz events. And, you know, so there's geniuses like Bill that I want to bring forth in this kind of environment, you know, for folks to listen to our conversations about our stuff and what we share in common and otherwise. So that's another part of the whole piece. So my inventory is my inventory of friends and associates that I know who I think are geniuses. My inventory of books that I need to set up in a library kind of situation so young people can come and read the stuff as opposed to being stored. My documents, my images, all of that. So I'm going to kind of close out at this point, and call this the end of Negotiating Maturity #1. Thanks for listening.